Great to chat, and I hope this will be helpful for you as it is for me. I've been thinking a great deal recently, really all my life, about what the point and the purpose of life is. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's brought this home to me lately is spending some time with a woman in our community who is about to die of cancer. And I don't know her well. She became a follower of Jesus fairly recently, and it has changed her life profoundly and dramatically. She'll probably die this week, or certainly in the next week or 10 days. And 2 days ago, I spent a couple of hours with her, and we talked deeply about life and her life and life in general. And we talked about faith and the deep things in life. And at one point, she thanked me for coming and spending time with her. And I said to her, and I meant this and this, that it was just a great privilege, an extraordinary privilege to spend that time with her, because she has done such an incredible job of preparing to die and to face death and think about it and process it and make right with people. And that's amazing. Amazing enough. I've seen people who have died far less well than that, who've been Christians for far longer. But this is what happened after we'd been talking for quite some time. I suggested that we might like to pray together, and she was getting tired and in pain. And so we're in this hospital room, and I held her hand. I held her hand tightly, put both my hands around her hand, and I started to pray. And the best way I can describe it is, it felt like the veil between heaven and earth was very thin. Here is a person who literally had one foot in the grave, or better still, was hovering on the border of this world and the next. And we talked a lot about images or ways to think about what death might be like. And the way I think about it as I read the Bible, obviously I don't know. I mean, by definition, death in our human experience is a one-way street, right? You don't come back from it. Only Jesus did, and he didn't come back to give us detailed instructions or descriptions of what exactly the processes were like. But here's how I think about it. And when this person and I talked, I think she found this helpful, and I did. I said, it really is falling asleep in this world and waking up home. Or maybe you can think about it, if you've ever cuddled a little baby in your arms who's asleep, and I remember this with my children, and then they wake up in your arms and they look up to you, and imagine being that baby. You come out of sleep and you wake up and you're just drinking in mum's eyes, dad's eyes, the gaze, and you're completely safe and you're completely loved, and nothing can harm you. And we talked a bit about that, and she found that helpful. So then we prayed, and it was like heaven entered the room. It's like through her closeness to death and to God, I could get a sense of that. And everything was just suffused with heaven. I think heaven is with us. We live in heaven now in one sense, but our perception of it is, there's a veil. The material gets in the way of the spiritual, and only occasionally do we see through that. And I feel like I had a glimpse seeing through. And you know what that does, of course? I mean, I'm very sad. This woman's dying. She leaves behind dependent children. She would rather not be dying in many ways. But what it does is it shows you what really matters in life and what will last. And let me tell you, at the moment, I've said this before, but I saw it so clearly. And if you've ever been with someone in the last moments, you'll know at the moment of death, everything else is stripped away. The only person who will go through that transition with you is God. So you might want to get to know God. There's nothing more significant. That's the only relationship that will last through death. Now, of course, the great hope and promise is that all the other meaningful relationships you have, and then some, will be restored in that one fundamental relationship. But that's what really matters, is the relationships, right? And now it's excruciating for those who are left behind. I saw a Facebook post from a friend whose daughter died of cancer some years ago. And, that's just awful. That's traumatic and horrible for those who are left behind. But if the Bible's true, and I think I got a glimpse of it got a preview the other day, is true for those who go ahead. Or as this lady who's dying says, the metaphor she's been using is she feels like you graduate from this life to the next life. Even though we weep and we grieve, and honestly it's horrendous, and there's no way you want to minimize the suffering and the heartache and the loss, but there's something there about the life to come, right? Now, I'm sometimes told one of the criticisms of Christianity is, it's always just talking about the life to come, but it doesn't have a lot to say about this life. That's not entirely true. Christianity has an awful lot to say about this life. But the truth is, we need to prepare ourselves for the next, because it's the one great certainty that awaits us all. I don't know with absolutely certainty anything about my future except for the fact that I will die. It's the only thing I know with absolute certainty. I don't know when, I don't know how. I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. I don't know what the state of my health is going to be like. I don't know what my employment's going to be like. I don't know how rich or how poor I'm going to be. I don't know what my relationships are going to be like. I don't know how my marriage is going to turn out. I don't know how my kids are going to turn out. I don't know where I'm going to go on holidays. I don't know what I'm going to eat for dinner tonight. I haven't prepared anything yet. But I know I'm going to die. And I have to figure out, and you have to figure out, how do I live well in the light of that? Yeah, of course we can deny it and minimize it, pretend it's not there. That's a common strategy. But there's enormous freedom and joy that comes from facing death, embracing Christ as the one who has defeated death, and then being completely free from distractions, focusing on irrelevancies, completely free to love, and at least imperfectly to pursue love, to pursue the way of Jesus in everything, even if it means you lose out on stuff in this life that people value, which of course happens. Love always costs. You're never going to love in the way of Jesus without losing all kinds of valuable things, your time, your energy, the sweet taste of revenge, the pursuit of money, sex, and power as ends in themselves. All these things go if you pursue the way of love in the way of Jesus. But there's glorious freedom in that, because love is the path of Jesus that crosses the grave and takes you to glory. And that's all that really matters. It's the relationships. That's what I've been thinking about. And then I've been thinking to myself, maybe you have these thoughts occasionally as well, as why don't you and I pursue spiritual growth, connection with God, as the most important thing in our lives? Why don't we do that? I pursue physical health and the acceptance of others and all kinds of things. and I give it my time and my energy. But isn't it weird that we don't say, man, getting to know God is the most significant thing in our lives, because it's the only thing that ultimately lasts. And in that lasting relationship, everything else is given to us. Dallas Willard had this, and I was chatting with this lady who's dying about this the other day. He said, anyone God will surely welcome into his new creation anyone who really wants to be with him. So this is the question, isn't it? Do you really want to be with God? Which you go, of course I do. And you go, do you know God well enough that you want to be with him? Are you sure you really want to be with him? How well do you know him? How well are you familiar with God's heart and his character? I've been thinking about this. A question I've been asking myself in our church community is, what would a more Christ-like version of yourself look like? And for me, I've thought a lot about this. Let me just pull up what I wrote this morning in my devotions as I was writing my pages out and thinking and preparing for the day. I wrote that for me to be Christ-like, a more Christ-like version of Mark would be for me to live in deeply connected, intimate, two-way, communicative relationship with God in the same way that Jesus lived with the Father and the Spirit in his time on earth, that I would live with the Father in my time on earth. Well, I hope this has all been helpful to you, and that it helps you to go away and maybe make some decisions about how you're going to live and how you're going to pursue becoming a little more Christ-like and focusing on the things that ultimately matter more than anything else. If you want to talk about this, if you want to get alongside me, to get alongside you, if you want some coaching, some prayer, some ministry in any way, shape or form, just reach out to me. It would be an absolute joy and delight and privilege to walk alongside you as you walk alongside Jesus in your life.